do guys, going back to the PTSD conversation a little bit, how do guys that sort of experienced this evil part of not only of the world but of themselves, because they had to do some things that they didn't want to do or they didn't like doing, and things that made them feel like there's a dark part of me that I don't really like too much. What's the from what I've said is you got to embrace that the fact that there's darkness in the world and that there's darkness in you got to embrace that and get a hold of it, not try and disguise it, not try and make it seem like it's not there. That's the same thing you're saying, right?
Yeah, well, when you're in really, they say there's no atheists in foxholes, and that's it's a bit of a cliche, but there's a deep truth in that, which is there's some circumstances that you find yourself in for which only religious language works. And if you happen to observe yourself doing something that's heinous enough to damage you psychologically, then you're in the realm of good and evil, archetypal good and evil. And unless you can start to conceptualize the world in that manner, you're never going to make sense out of it. And so partly it depersonalizes it. It's you that did this. But it's like the capacity for evil isn't just you. It's part of humanity. Maybe it's part of the structure of the cosmos, and you happen to stumble over it naively, and so it hurt you. There's this old Egyptian story about a god named Horus, and he's the god of attention. So he's represented by the Egyptian eye, so he pays attention. He's also a falcon, and falcon has great vision and flies above everything, right? And he's also the force that revitalizes the dead father in Egyptian mythology. But he has a fight with his evil uncle, Set, who's a precursor to the idea of Satan, and then you can tell partly because the words are quite similar. And he has a terrible battle with Set, who's taken over the kingdom and is a terrible tyrant and is killing everyone, and everything's going to hell. And he has a battle with him to regain control of his kingdom. And that's fine, and he's a god. And so is Seth. And they have a fight, and it's a terrible fight. And during the fight, Seth tears out one of his eyes. When you think, well, that's a god, right? And nonetheless, he ends up with his vision damaged, his consciousness damaged. Now, he gains a different kind of sight. He gains insight, right? Because now he knows the nature of evil, but he pays a big price for it. And so you think, well, if that's the case for a god, how much more is it the case for a man to be damaged? It's like absolutely right. It's no joke to encounter malevolence. I've seen that in my clinical clients too. I had a client who was terrified into nightly convulsions for 4 years by the look on her boyfriend's face when he attacked her. It took me a long time to unpack that. It was like a 3-month process. But she was very naive, very, very, very naive, because her parents had raised her in a world where the evil queen was not allowed to visit, like the parents in Sleeping Beauty, so she was way too sheltered. And she thought that human beings were only good, and then she saw the look on his face that indicated that he was out to consciously harm her. And he couldn't. They had a fight, a physical fight, and she was strong enough to prevail. He wasn't that big. But that wasn't the point. It shattered her world, because she didn't understand until that point that someone could actually consciously want to hurt you. That wasn't just, they weren't just in a bad mood, and it wasn't just because of the way they were raised and, all those excuses that people come up, that he was not only going to hurt her, but he was going to enjoy it. And if you don't understand the part of you that's capable of that, then, well, you're dangerously naive, and dangerous as well, because you don't know what you're capable of. So
a lot of